On this episode of Supervision Simplified, we are exploring one thing Valerie's really, really bad at, which is flex and adapt, which is a K-CREP skill and can be done really well therapeutically, but not in her personal professional life. So stay tuned to hear how she took a day off work, played hooky, and went to play with elk and bison and learned about how to flex and adapt.
Hello and welcome to Supervision Simplified. I'm Dr. Amy Parks.
And I'm Valarie Harris.
We're so excited to have you back with us today. And we're going to be talking about some stuff that's been going on for both of us right now. And certainly it's something that Valarie is working on very, very intentionally, and probably something that I am working on kind of a really maybe very different way. But it has to do with the idea of capacity building and also sort of internal self-regulation and this idea of the transitions that we all go through, both from graduate school to licensure, from licensure to a more seasoned clinician. And I have to bring up this funny story because I watched this pretty hysterical video today, and it was a person who was you'll get a kick out of this, Valarie. It was a person who was showing, role playing a season, like a brand new clinician versus like a seasoned clinician. So the brand new clinician, super buttoned up, of course, very professional. And, they said something in response to the client saying, that they had recently broken up with their boyfriend or something like that. The clinician very thoughtfully said something tell me more about your experience with that relationship, and how do you feel like that it would be best to work on processing that. And then the experienced clinician was like, it's about time. That guy was an asshole anyway.
Yes, I have seen that. I've seen that. Yes, it's fantastic. Yeah.
And I did think, there's probably a happy medium there, but I did think it's really interesting as we go through our careers and start from the start to, I don't want to say the end, but from the start, as we move through our careers, how we hold space for our own professional growth, our own professional shifts. And I think that you and I are both going through some interesting personal and professional changes as well. And so we wanted to take some time today to sort of open the space for both of us to sort of have this conversation, but also to invite our listeners in for this conversation and to give us some feedback too about sort of the things that they're going through around these same kinds of ideas and what kinds of things that they're thinking about. Because right now it's a very volatile time. I don't know if there's ever not a volatile time, but it seems more volatile than ever. We're in February of 2025. There's a lot going on in the world. There are weird things that have never been canceled before are being canceled in our professional lives. Things are changing that have never really changed before for both of us, and seems really strange. So you've been telling me this morning, or this afternoon rather, a little bit about some things that you normally do to maintain your sanity and to keep yourself, your word was disciplined. I think I'm probably the opposite of disciplined. My neurodivergence keeps me, I have to have people co-working with me in order to stay disciplined. But you have some real strategies, and you've sort of swung from one side to the other in that sort of discipline realm. So tell us a little bit about where you are in your journey around this sort of capacity building and this discipline, and what are you taking in this moment in your sort of professional journey as a business owner and as a supervisor and as a leader?
So yes, I'm coming to you in the spirit of authenticity. Normally I would shower and do my hair, but you know what? I was at the gym and I was like, no, I'm just in the spirit of authenticity and to work on my flex and adapt skills, because that's K-CREP. I'm just going to show up as is, because sometimes that's what's required, and that's okay. And I don't want to normalize this polished approach to the longevity in the field, because I just don't think that that is realistic and sustainable. And I want to make sure that I'm modeling that. So, but the balance has been hard to strike for me, because historically, as someone who was very neurodivergent and did not have a lot of systems, and when I say neurodivergent, I am hyperactive ADHD. So for me, inattentiveness was not my issue. It's focus. I can focus on anything, but I get so into that focus, everything else can just fall to the wayside. And then what would happen is I would creep up and not even know I was creeping up, and then suddenly wake up one day and it's gone. And the reason it's gone is because my capacity is gone. And I would never feel it coming, though. And so it's not like burnout doesn't sneak up on, it sneaks up on me in a way that's not typical for most people. And so it became very difficult to figure out how to engage my world and my life and stay on top of the things I need to without overdoing it, because it's my nature to overdo all the things. And that ends up leaving me like gaps in my capacity. So, one of the things that I've realized is I was not disciplined, and I've never been super disciplined. And I think that's okay. But I've always really admired people who were self-disciplined, who are very efficient. And so I really wanted to learn, how do they get to be that way? And what I've learned is you don't just focus on discipline, you focus on habits. And habits actually create discipline. And I wanted to be self-disciplined because there are times in life where it's absolutely required. And I wanted to know how to flip it on and how to live that life. And that really is required when I'm carrying a lot of different roles. There are certain times I have to be disciplined, or else things just will not get done. So I would track habits and started learning the art of getting disciplined. But then what I would notice, and I know that you notice this as well as my friends, my family, everybody else, is I couldn't let go of that then. I could not flex and adapt at all, because my fear would be so large that if I get off course from that, I'm going to lose it all and I'm going to go right back to where I was. And so I'm really now working, before I roll out this whole capacity book, to make sure that I don't overdo capacity training to the point that it's not sustainable for the everyday person.
Right.
And so I'm really having to work that middle ground of that flex and adapt, so that I can really be about what I say I'm about, which is being able to pivot in different seasons. And last week was just a hard week for me for whatever reason. I haven't really fully had a vacation since July. September we were together, so that was sort of like a vacation of sorts, but it was still also work related. And I just could feel myself not as engaged in my project related work. Like I just don't care as much as I did the week before.
Right.
And so I knew my capacity was waning. And someone in my life that's very important to me also knew that and knows about the book, and just challenged me yesterday in the most graceful way and was like, hey, update to your day. We're going to go on an adventure. This is your test for your capacity. We're going to go, you can remote work. I've got this set up, and this set up. Don't overthink it, just do it. And I knew that challenge was a warranted challenge. And I was like, I've got to do it. I have to do this. And I still had to text my leadership. And I'm like, can I do this? Is it like, I kind of feel guilty. And they're like, no. And I thought, my staff gets mental health days.
Right.
Why do you not take a mental health day?
Right.
It was great. I ended up in Kentucky off-roading, looking at elk and buffalo that I didn't even know were in Kentucky.
Me neither.
No one died. No one died. The whole practice didn't fail. And I am brighter and happier today. And I'm not showered because I realized midday, I'm like, you know what? I'll work this weekend because I don't have any plans Saturday and Sunday. I'm going to take the rest of the day and clean the house, do laundry. I'm just going to ebb and flow with what my capacity is telling me I need to do, because that's the freedom that I've created in my life to do that. And I can.
Well, and another approach to that, and when we think about, the people that we work with and lead and support, another approach to that is looking at your tasks, the things you're required to complete, and say to yourself, do these really have to be done by the weekend? Can these tasks be moved to next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Can these be done during the work week next week? Because think about it, in the scheme of things, how critical is everything that we put on our schedules? How critical is everything that we do on a day-to-day basis? And so, I do know that there's a lot of pride that we put into accomplishing things and getting things done and getting things off of our lists. And I know there's also a lot to be said for being in the moment. And, I saw a post that a colleague of ours, TJ Walsh, put out, and shout out to TJ Walsh. We'll have him on the podcast to talk about this. But, and I know that this is true for all of our clinicians and myself included, and you as well. But right now, is particularly, we're carrying so many people's heavy caseloads, heavy client, issues. And, so much is happening in the world that we're being dysregulated every day.
Oh, yeah.
And so for us not to be in the like, I find myself at the end of the day, on a day that I'm seeing, 7 or 8 clients, which is not every day, lucky for me. But, I'm coming home and all I want to do is lay on the sofa and watch, like dumb TV, which is not me. I don't even watch TV, but I just need to just lay there, or do something dumb. Like, I can't even really read a book because it requires too much of my mental capacity to even read. Mm-hmm. And, and my husband gets frustrated because he's like, hello, can you, have, and I'm like, no, I don't want to have anything to do. I need to decompress. And we don't do that enough, and we don't teach that enough. And so I'm over this word burnout, but I'm really into this idea of, we've got to start teaching regulation, and we have to teach it such that we don't need other people to do it for us.
Correct. And we can't stop life to do it.
No, we can't. Right. You can't quit your job. You can't sell your practice. You can't quit your job. You can't move to another country.
$100,000 and do less at a job. It's not how it works.
No, it's not. I mean, there are things, of course, that you can plug in to support you. But again, you can't move to Italy because you're burned out. It just doesn't work like that. And so what do we do from the very beginning? What do we do in grad school? What do we do in supervision? What do we do along the way that continues to reinforce care of the self and regulation along the way, every single day, all the time, every day, for therapists, for people that are in this role? Because you get, particularly I'm in DC. So of course, it's bad for everyone. It's really bad right here because there's so many federal workers. Mm-hmm. So I would say half of everyone, 50% of the people that we have coming in are worried that they're going to be fired at 10:15 tonight. It's every day. There's an email coming out every day at 10:15 at night saying your department is being closed, whatever. And so if you figure that half your caseload every day is thinking they're going to lose their job, that's a lot to be dealing with on a daily basis. That's a lot of fear to be holding every single day. And so you can't not be afraid yourself for them.
Right.
So going into a session thinking, oh my gosh, I am going to be so afraid for this person, yet I need to think about, I walk out of the sessions and I think, oh, I'm so afraid. And then I think, wait a second, why am I afraid? I don't need to be afraid. There's nothing I'm afraid of. It's just such a disconcerting feeling to be at this point of having to regulate and having to do it on your own. Yes. But the requirements of that are so critical that, I think it's really important for us to figure out how to help people know how to do that. So what are some things you're figuring out along the way that are helpful?
Well, one thing I would say that I've figured out is I think there are 2 different types of people, sort of like with Kim Scott's Radical Candor, where you have superstars and rock stars. I think some people who fit more in that rock star category, this is not scientific by any means, but it's definitely founded in a lot of observation and experience, personal experience. Those people tend to have really steady practices and they are more disciplined by nature. It's just, they're more habit driven, period. And I feel like those people automatically tend to be a little more discerning and know better what they need and can just do those with reinforcement. So just in our group alone, I'm willing to bet 100% Debbie's one of those. 100%. She is highly discerning. She probably very much knows what
Do you
she
mean
needs.
Debbie Frankel?
Yes.
Okay.
I would be willing to bet she has some of the same practices that she's had probably for 5 to 10 years and continues to do those because they stabilize her and she just knows herself that well. I feel like others of us move much faster, like myself. You probably, I could see even Libby falling into that, where what worked for us in one season is not going to be the same in the next. So that can be confusing when it comes to capacity, because you can look at someone like Debbie and go, well, I'm trying to do that, but it's not working for me. Whereas that's been a stable thing for her. For us, we're still have stable needs. The needs don't change. It's the way we meet the need.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point that might be engaging in this new hobby that's creative. But I know me, and 6 months down the road, once I accomplish that, or I've like figured it out, it won't bring the same challenge and it won't bring the same gratitude for me, because that's just how my brain works. And I'll need a different type of challenge that's fun to get me in, to give me capacity, if that makes sense. Otherwise I'm going to be bored. So I'm learning that not only is it just, it's dynamic, but it's also it's very different for different people in different seasons and different stressors. So you can't just spa out and spa like you spa'd when your kids were like toddlers, and you're just not going to necessarily feel the same benefits of that, because chances are you've got more time in your day to relax than you did when you had toddlers. So you're going to need a little more novelty or creativity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is when you're working with a supervisee, or you're supporting other clinicians in, in co-support, or, supervisory, sharing or whatever, to be able to help them sort of vomit all the things, sort of put out all the things that are weighing on their capacity. So you have to sort of know what you're up against, I think, to some extent.
Sure, absolutely.
That's kind of part one. And then I guess part two is sort of looking at a menu of things that feel like bring up some kind of joy, or some kind of feeling, like the Marie Kondo kind of like spark some degree of alignment, joy, maybe some kind of lightness, some kind of feeling of, ooh, that sounds kind of fun. I definitely know that after a period of time when you have been under the blanket of this burnout feeling, or this, like lack of capacity feeling for a long period of time, it's kind of like a blanket of snow, which I have outside my window right now. Like, it's been so long, it's dormant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes some excavating to do. And so if you start from the very beginning of a clinician's journey with saying, you need to stay on top of what brings you joy, what keeps you aligned with your true self, what keeps your capacity, healthy, what keeps you sane, what keeps you from, burning out and getting exhausted early on. Like, if you stay on top of that from the beginning, no one taught us this when we were first starting out. We were just get in the trenches and do your damnedest and work your ass off. And that's that.
And earn your stripes. So
right. And I'm not saying that anyone did anything wrong. I'm just saying we're figuring it out now.
Yes.
And the burdens seem greater now. I don't know. It just seems heavier now, but, it's not necessarily heavier now. I don't know. It feels greater, but, it's interesting. So if you start early and you are consistently on top of that, you can stay above that. You can stay above that blanket of oppressive sort of, whatever it is that I'm trying to kind of articulate, that stuff that just weighs you down.
Yes, you catch it sooner.
You catch it sooner.
You educate them about it so they know how to track it and notice it. You give them a pipeline of addressing it so that they know it's okay to say, hey, capacity struggling right here. Like and they're not coming to you saying, I need to cancel a week of clients, because we've already educated them and they understand you're going to struggle with capacity because this is the nature of our job. And yet we still care about your capacity. And we don't want you to think that just because it's the nature of the work you do, that we're not here to support you and help you in this. And so it allows them to communicate a lot sooner. And what I'm also finding that has been new and really powerful is some of my people are they've either had burnout or been touching close to burnout, and they know that burnout can come, that they are so hyper aware that sometimes I even have to normalize, okay, we're giving you assessments. Your assessments are showing that your burnout score is actually, it's in the low average. So you're actually not close to burnout. I think this hyper awareness is partly because we've done a lot of education around it, and that's a good thing. And because your score is ticking up a tiny little bit. So what you're feeling is absolutely valid. You're feeling a little bit of capacity strain, and it's so important that you're catching it this soon. And part of this is because you're a brand new clinician, and there are some certain skill sets and things that we bring into the room. Sometimes we're working harder than the client. Sometimes we are not disengaging, in an intentional way before we get home, so there's lots of little things that you can tweak. But what I'm finding is I love that I have some clinicians who are so hyper aware that they're feeling the little nuanced uptick in the capacity strain, which then allows us to like hit it head on and like get really curious about that and go, are there certain clients you notice that more with, or certain days? Maybe we need to shift something in the schedule. What are you doing before work? What are your rituals after work? And they're nowhere near burnout, but because they've had a language for it, and they can now catch as their capacity is starting to get strained, which tells me, great, we can work within. It's kind of like pushing people towards the edges of their window of tolerance to help widen it.
Yep.
I feel like this is the goal for a new clinician, is to get them to the edges, and then we provide the support and scaffolding, and then it widens a little more and a little more, versus us finding out they're way outside of it and have been for 6 months. And now you have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that's exactly what we need to be doing from the very beginning, is looking at and surveying those kinds of concerns so that we can continue to skill build and build that. I like that, using that metaphor, the same sort of language of the window of tolerance. It's the same kind of thing. The window of capacity, which I'm hoping that you're using that in your book. But I think that exact language is really valuable, because you're thinking about that same kind of idea with clinicians throughout their professional journey. And the tricky thing here is that again, you have to start from the very beginning, very, very, very beginning. And yet also there are so many thousands and thousands of clinicians who never learned this.
Yeah.
And sadly, they're the highest skilled. And so how do we go back and re-teach, re-support, rebuild, re-scaffold for them? Because I'm sadly afraid that we're losing great people to, career burnout. Like, like
certainly are.
I know several people who are like, you know what, I'm going to go work in a bookstore. I'm going to go, knit for a living, and more power, like, go be you. And I'm sad because they are incredible clinicians, and they just have not really been able to hold it, together, because they just didn't have the same kinds of supports.
Yeah, I would say when somebody is in that place, I think it's okay to give permission to take a break.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't give them permission.
No, but I'm saying like that might be the thing that brings them back to the field. There was a time, I think I had some pretty bad burnout in 2010, and took like, I don't know, probably took a good 8 months off and was just at home during that time and I didn't know if I'd ever re-enter the field at all. Like it was just, the whole field felt a little tarnished for me. I think my identity and worth at that time was in the role. And so, even that values alignment piece, and that's one of the things I've learned with burnout in general is a lot of people go into the field for a reason that isn't really aligned with the way the field is. So like,
Oh, right. Interesting
yeah,
point.
yeah. So if you think about dentists, or veterinarians, like they go, I want to help animals, but they don't think about putting them to sleep. You know what I mean? Like there's this, sometimes I feel like grad schools could do a better job of checking that to begin with and educating around that and helping develop the person of the therapist much sooner so that doesn't sneak on them. But because I think it definitely snuck up on me, and there was just this bitterness with just the suffrage of the world and not being equipped to do that, and feeling like no matter how much you did, it didn't make a dent in the world. And so having that space of probably 8 months, I was almost a little nervous to re-enter the work field, but I have never lost sight of that, like a real valid fear of moving back into that space and like noticing those things. And so I think that that's very, they say all information is valuable, and even for those that we may lose for a season, maybe losing them for a season is what we need to have for them to get the longevity and come back in a way that is aligned for them and allows them to carry out their career in a way where they're not going to be as at risk for that.
And be able to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be, yeah. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't value what they need to do for themselves. I wish at the professional level, that we, it's kind of like moms, there's this sort of badge of honor. I'm so busy. And it's like, like you're proud, like I'm so busy. I have triplets or whatever. I'm so busy. I have 4 kids. I'm so busy. And it's when you are a clinician and you're like at a professional association conference or whatever, I'm so busy. Like I've got so many irons in the fire. Good for you kind of thing, right?
Right.
When can we normalize I've got great balance, like I've been sailing and I saw clients, right?
I love work hard, play hard. Like,
yeah, when is that going to be?
That should be the goal.
When is that? Yeah. When is that going to be the goal? When is our professional association going to like applaud the people who, are doing like fun stuff and working, when is that? Because that's really, I think, the ultimate, that's what we want to be able to do, but I guess maybe that's just not their role. But that's the way I think we need to be keeping people in the field longer.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I was just trying to add that silver lining of like, don't worry, they can come back. Like they'll come back.
No, you're right. You're absolutely
right.
Like,
I'm looking for that silver lining, but I agree. The better the better ask and the better solve would be like, how about what can we do to not let it get to that? You know what I mean?
Oh, no, you're right.
From this, and that's what I hear you saying is like, how do we take this information and disrupt that, not just in our group practices and with new clinicians, for those of us with teaching practices, and with our supervisees, for those of us that are supervisors, but how do we disrupt this as a new clinician? And I will say, I'm very encouraged that I think a lot of new clinicians are a little more aware, and they are trying to be a little more mindful. And I think it's sad, but sadly, I think they've seen a lot of burned out supervisors or leaders in their world. And they're like, I don't want to be that. So I think that's a good thing. But it would be so great if we could see that on the association level. That's one of many things that I would love to ask them to do.
So somehow I want to
level of frustration.
I want to disrupt this idea that, okay, so let's see if I can kind of articulate this. I want to disrupt the idea that being a clinician means still working at a high level, like still seeing your clients when they need to be seen and taking care of yourself. So it doesn't mean saying, oh, I'm going to take off 2 weeks, or I'm never going to work on these days, or I'm going to,
I'm never going to do anything after hours, even if there's a clinician emergency that calls for, like sometimes that's normal and you'll feel
right. Exactly. Or my boss says I have to work Saturdays, I'm quitting, okay. So where can we like put that aside, especially when you're new to the field and you need to sort of, there isn't, to some extent, there's a small amount of pay your dues. I'm not saying you have to kill it, like go overboard, and when can we balance that with making it okay to horseback ride and go on away for the weekend with your friends and,
Or
like go out
be a
to dinner.
weekend, yeah, or be a weekend warrior and then say to your boss, like I think I've had someone say, like, hey, I'd really like to enter some of these races and they're on weekends. And it's like, use your time off, go for that.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right,
Or we
right.
can or figure out where to move your clients, and I trust you, like
Yes,
go do that. That's important. And
yes,
yes, if it's only occurring on a Saturday, I mean, you're a weekend warrior. We will
right,
totally support you moving that for a season when it only happens during the summer for you to then
right.
do those things that
and
bring
and
you
how
joy.
do we normalize for that's so for new clinicians, and how do we normalize for seasoned clinicians no guilt around, on Mondays I'm going to leave to go to my son's soccer practices and things like that, and still having the capacity to have a full calendar. It's I want to disrupt this industry of this idea that we have to do all the things, and at the same time I don't want to build entitlement. So I think that that's where it's tricky. Like, I don't want to teach people that they can just, not work.
Yeah, I think the secret lies in accountability,
Right.
honestly.
Yes.
Transparency and accountability. So when I took that day yesterday, I knew I needed to do it. I knew I could recover the time because I don't have anything planned on the weekend. So in my mind, I thought I'll just reverse my off days from Saturday, Sunday, and I'll just flip them. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And I can do that, and it's okay.
Right.
And my capacity I will be more effective engaging in work this weekend, that project work,
Right.
because I gave myself that capacity. So
Right.
it makes sense. And yet the first thing I did was reach out to my leadership team
Right.
because I just wanted to say, like, this is what I'm thinking. And one of them was like, no, I've noticed a tip in your capacity since last week. Like I've noticed, I very much noticed it. And so, no, I think that this is good. This is what you need to do. And so to me, the reason I want to be accountable is one, I want to model that to them, but two, I want them to hold me accountable if they think, no, I feel like you're just isolating, you're not okay. And they will, because I've given that permission. So I think it's about asking for what you need, or speaking, here's what I'm thinking, but then also allowing those that are trusted, who know you, who can see the spots in yourself that you don't see, to create the honest conversation to challenge you where you need to be challenged. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes your best thinking is not what you need in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't want you to have to ask permission from your leadership team when you need to take care of yourself. And I also find myself often just sort of reverting to, like, I just don't feel well. Like I can't, like I want to be authentic in my,
Right.
like, I'm taking time to, like, I have to come up with what I'm doing. Like I have to be doing something. And that's my
Yeah,
problem. Like
I
I
see. So
can't just sit and do
So your
nothing.
I don't feel well is I need capacity.
Right.
And for
Exactly.
me, my leadership team had challenged me a while back because I would do it wouldn't be in that way, but it would be a different way. I would get super quiet. And instead they were like, we need you to be sharing when you're struggling. And because, and it basically what it was is they knew I was, and they were uncomfortable because I wouldn't just say it.
Right.
So I was like, oh, you don't want me to share? And they're like, no, do. So I'm also being accountable to what I said I would do, which
Right.
is saying, here's what I'm noticing. And I'm just trying to see, are they noticing it as well?
Right.
And
Right.
to check my own barometer, because we all know I'm going to be really hard on myself. So when their barometer is, no, I noticed that too, and you've done this, and then I'm like, okay, so I am not hiding. I'm not making an excuse. Like I'm actually doing a healthy thing. It just feels funny because it's new.
So the conversations we want to be having with the people that we're working with, that are supporting us, that we're supporting, is, what kind of language would help us know when you're feeling some kind of uptick in your lack of capacity, or when you're struggling a little bit. What is that going to look like for us? And
Yeah.
how can we, how are we going to understand that? And how am I going to support you? How are we going to remind you what you need to do to build that capacity? And then, I think thinking through a way to kind of keep an eye on that, to help build that window of tolerance, that window of capacity through skill building. I think all of those things are really, really important. And I think we both agree that starting from the very beginning is key, But there's never a time, as we are both attesting to, there's never a time that it's too late.
No.
That we have to continue to think this through, because if we're going to stay in this field and not go work at bookstores or knit for a living, that, I mean, which we could, of course, but if we're going to stay in this field where it's hard and there's a lot to be done, we have to continue to work on this capacity, or we're going to end up on the couch all the time.
That's
and
right.
It requires hard work. And it's interesting because I teach at a university where I know the last class, a lot of the students were like, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. This is their first class. This is the end of their first class in their graduate program, the last class of their first semester class, right? And they said, therapy is a lot harder than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you think? Yeah, maybe
like
it is.
Like when your non-therapist friends are like, I've always thought I could be a therapist.
Right. Yeah.
Like people ask me for advice. I give advice. Yeah.
Once. You give it once. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How about week after week after week after week?
A whole lot more than that, but yeah.
It's not even advice. It's so much more.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we know that there are some ways that we can help each other and work together, and that supervisors can be supporting. So thanks for sharing those tips with us today. And we're going to put some of these links in our show notes so that people can reference some of these ideas too. And we're really excited to start hearing more and more and more about capacity. So get your book written, Valarie.
Yes.
I know you're working on it. Thanks to everybody for tuning into Supervision Simplified. Remember that the revolution starts with you. And don't forget to subscribe and share this with your network. We're eager for your comments, your stories, and your feedback to ensure we're hitting the right topics that you care about. Keep simplifying and elevating your supervision game. And until the next time, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.